After my first husband died, I had to survive. I had to raise, I was a single mom. I had to find a way to pay the bills to get through the most devastating experience. And I abandoned everything. It's not just people with tragedy that experience this abandonment. And the waiting room life. It's millions of people, and most of us die there and we don't even know we were not living our life. It's a very painful experience, and to have adults in my classroom over the years in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and to still be talking about that moment, it's because they never had the chance to talk about it. They never said, oh my God, I didn't realize that moment really affected my choices in not only jobs, but relationships. But the biggest discovery of all, of working with literally thousands of people from all over the world. No exaggeration.
I've been having conversations with people and discovering what's most important to them in a different way than you. I've been in the financial world for 20-something years, but it's never been about money to me. It's always been about their life. And so in so many ways, it's almost like you become their therapist at times. You're not licensed for it. It's not what your job is, but you're there to listen to them about their challenges. And 90% of it has nothing to do with anything that they're there to see you for. And so when I do this podcast, and what I'm so grateful for is, you know, not everybody does research like you did. I always do an entry for all those of you that are listening. I think it's really cool to mention. I always tell everybody, hey, our podcast is a unique group of listeners. They're high performers. High performers can be moms that are doing way too much at home and with their families and feel like they can't get enough in every day. They could be family members that are out there working and doing all those things. They could be CEOs and entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, life is what they care most about. And you came back with information and details, and we were talking about your Greek heritage. And it's just because we had a connection right out of the gate, it makes a conversation valuable. And so I'm excited because anytime you invest in another relationship, another human, and you look at it as a relationship, not a transaction, it's going to be very good. So thank you for that time.
And Scott, I also want to say that I remember, and you know, I'll jump right in and say, it took me a long time to learn this lesson that I'm going to share, which is every experience I have, I don't want it to be about getting to a destination anymore. And that changed for me a few years ago. I want it to be about the experience. And yes, my book came out, and as you know, you have to go through all these things, and I didn't want to go through them. I actually, around December, so that would have been around 8 months, I guess now 7 months or so before the book was going to come out, I started having panic attacks. And this is my third rodeo. This is not my first time. This is, oh my God, I'm nervous the first time. I was experiencing panic attacks for the first time since I was a teenager. And I went to my doctor and I said, I don't know what's going on. This is like, I am feeling anxious, I'm feeling afraid. I've done this a million times before. Why am I feeling like this? And I was so afraid of losing the life I had created to jump back into this arena. And I said to my agents, to everyone, the team around, I said, I only want to do this if every conversation I'm having feels personal and feels like it's for me and for the person. I'm getting chills just saying that, because we live in a world where we're doing things for a purpose, for a reason, for a mission, for someone else, for people pleasing, for all those things. That is actually what I call the waiting room. That I didn't want to go in the waiting room to launch my book. I'm like, no way. I'm going to be crazy. I'm going to have my Greekness. I'm going to have my accent. I'm going to move my hands around. And I said, if I'm not going to sound cool or mysterious or like, you know, I am an author and, you know, a very special person without saying that. I said, I am not a special person in the way that people would think. I am a very imperfect, crazy person with anxiety, person with, that I've gone through tragedies, but even though they were the hardest moments of my life, I struggled with so many other things, like every person who's listening to us. And I want to remove the halo, the myth of the writer, of the author, of the, you know, that person that's standing on the stage in front of an arena. Like, I have never been this person, and I actually don't want to be. And I'm always going to be the underdog. I'm always going to be not the cool kid in the group. And Scott, bring it. That's the way. Anything else is a lie.
I think the closer we get to who we really are. So the beauty of getting older is wisdom, and the closer we get to who we really are, sometimes when we find ourselves going through the motions, it's much easier to identify it quicker. So writing a book is stressful. For anyone that hasn't done it, it's very uncomfortable. I mean, I remember when they sent me the edit, and I kept delaying, and finally someone said to me, hey, do you know that like 88% of people will only read 60 pages, and the majority of them won't even read the book at all? They'll just buy it and let it sit on a shelf somewhere. And I thought, what am I worried about? But to your point about I wanted to be so close to who I am, I think it's because the more you get in touch with what really matters to you, the more you identify that false feeling, that fakeness that you don't like. And we find ourselves doing it every day. It's not like we're not going to find ourselves in a conversation that we'd rather not have, or we're doing something because we have to. And so I completely relate to what you're saying. And there's such an imperfection. I'm dropping off my son to college this weekend, for my oldest son. And so when we talk about invisible loss, I can feel the change. And for me, having two sons, you know, this is really interesting. But I wrote a note to him over the last 3 or 4 days. I don't even know if I'm going to give it to him. I probably will, but I wrote it mainly for myself to work through the things that I wanted to say. And the most important thing is your halo comment. We are all imperfect, right? We are all completely imperfect. And what we do with our parents is we kind of put them in a perfection spot, but they're imperfect just like us, and they do the best that they can. And then when it's over, or it's the next chapter, it feels like this really, really tough moment, because you're having to then hope you did the best that you could, right? And so everyone goes through this. If you haven't, you will. But the point I'm making is, I have these conversations because I learn something from every conversation. I grow every time we have a conversation. I've had shows where I don't agree with anything the person's saying, but I walk away and I'm better because I listened and I learned, and I thought about something later that I never would have thought about because I opened my mind. And so I'm grateful that you have that mindset, and I'm grateful that we know that if you've written 3 books and this is your 3rd, that this is probably the closest that you've come to tapping into the real you, which makes it even more important to get out to the world.
Thank you for saying that. And as I was writing it, I was going through my own struggles. There was a lot of things going on. I remember thinking, why am I going through all of this while I'm writing this book? I felt like I broke my foot, like I was going through things I've never gone through in my life while I was writing it. And it took a couple of years to write, and it took 3 different versions, by the way, not at least 10 edits, but versions from beginning to end. This was the hardest book because I was putting in there, oh my God, and everything, like I want everyone to find what I feel like is what we lose, what invisible loss is, and people don't understand, realize that it's the loss of that original self we came in the world to be with. And we start out in this life, Scott, and people experience these I call the moments of impact happen to us, and we abandon that original, that true self, that authenticity of ourselves to please the world that lives outside of us, to fit into the culture, to fit into the society, to fit in with our families, to blend in so we don't stand out. And the further away we go from that person, which I've experienced myself, especially after my first husband died, I had to survive. I had to raise, I was a single mom. I had to find a way to pay the bills to get through the most devastating experience. And I abandoned everything. And then I abandoned myself so many times after that when I didn't have to, because we're so used to surviving. And then I realized it's not just people with tragedy that experience this abandonment. And the waiting room life. It's millions of people, and most of us die there, and we don't even know we were not living our life. We were not living the life we're here to live, and I will not stop living the life that I want, even when a book is coming out, even when everyone else wants me to live the way, the way they think I should be living. And the choices I'm making going forward, and I'm about to make in my life, Scott, let me tell you, people would think, why? Why would she want to do this now? Why is she doing this? Why is she doing this? And I'm like, because I want to, because that's the way I wanna have this next chapter, and it doesn't look the same as someone else would have been in my shoes. And it's gonna be different. And I'm just gonna have a blast, Scott.
Well, you're making a choice. At the end of the day, when what you talk about so often is the choice to embrace the challenges and these moments, these invisible losses, the things that I've heard this referred to as like minor concussions almost, where you hit your head, but maybe you weren't concussed, but it was enough that it shook you, and you don't realize how it shakes you, but it does change you, and you have a choice to go into what you think the world wants and needs of you, or a choice to choose your own path. And so many of us, and I stand here as a father and a husband, and I see this with the women in my life so often. Moms do this more than anybody.
Yes. Yeah.
You are constantly sacrificing your own good. My mother would literally give me the food that's in front of her after not eating for a week to make sure that I was eating, or any of us were eating, down to the newest member of the family. Like, it's not just a there may be a little bit of a pecking order. I know she listens to this, so I still think that the pecking order starts with her oldest. But the point I'm making is there is this sacrifice, and when you build your life around only sacrificing, it might get really hard to find the real version of you that you're working towards. And so it sounds like you're choosing that path, the right path.
Yeah, and this book, I remember doing the work. So I've been teaching the work I created for 14 years. There's been 2 major clinical trials that were funded by scientists and so on, and I'm very honored that this has happened, and actually still shake my head that this happened. But what I've learned is that we do give validation, acknowledgement for the tragedies in our lives, but most people, as they are experiencing their journey in life, tragedies might be, thank goodness, we have one. I mean, I was so young when I experienced my tragedy. I was 34 when he passed, 30 when he was diagnosed with terminal, and we had a 9-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. So it was quite catastrophic. And I was like, I didn't know. And of course, this is the part that nobody thinks about me, because they think I did this work because of what happened. I have a master's in counselling with my thesis on grief, on the stages of bereavement. I did this in my 20s in England because I was passionate about helping people who lose people they love, as I could not. Being Greek, and as you are Italian, we're passionate. Our family members are like I don't know. I couldn't imagine losing anyone I loved, or anyone. How do they get through that? That's. I thought I was going to lose my mind, and I made that decision before any of this happened to me. None. This was like destined, and it was like that. So when it happened to me, Scott, I was like, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to be a grief therapist. So I ran away. I went and worked in the corporate world. I had another postgraduate degree in human resources. So I went in mega companies. I'm like, I went far. And then I said, if I ever make it back to living life fully because I was suffering so much, I will go back and get everyone else who's suffering. And I did. And I did that. And that journey started in 2010. And my goodness, what a journey it has been. 14 years of doing this. But the biggest discovery of all, of working with literally thousands of people from all over the world. No exaggeration. I'm in reflective mode now, 3 books later, all this work. What the biggest discovery was that it wasn't the big tragedies. It wasn't the traditional losses, like even a divorce or a breakup. It was something we had no words for, something we had no labels for, something we had no validation acknowledgement for. That's why I call them moments of impact. It was an invisible experience that we couldn't even know for ourselves. So it wasn't just invisible to others that we were experiencing this sadness, this anxiety, but it was invisible to us. And slowly, and with all these people, we did this. We figured it out. We discovered what it was. And without understanding that part of your life, you actually can't re-enter living. You can't exit the waiting room. You can't, because you think, actually, the more okay you feel, this is the tricky part. The more okay you feel, the more accolades you get about, look at this guy, look how great his life is. He's running this company. He has these 3 beautiful children. Look at his beautiful house. Look at all these great things. The more we are imprisoned in what looks good, actually, the deeper we are in the waiting room. And those are the people that I said to myself, my God, including myself in many different ways, we got to get out. We got to find what it is that we want, because we don't know. We don't know what it is. We actually don't. We think, and you heard this expression, I'm sure, many times. You have nothing to complain about. What do you have to complain about? You have food on your table. You have 2 healthy kids. You live in this great country. Like, you have nothing to complain about. But this is where it's very dangerous, and I mean it when I say dangerous. It is us. We are experiencing an inner poverty, an inner experience of being hungry and pretending not to be hungry for the life that we want to live. And we are here to live this life. And if we don't, spiritually speaking, our soul, we're here to not only help each other, but to fulfill ourselves. And I really think that's the biggest loss, that we don't experience that at all. I know I'm Greek, so I talk a lot. So
no, I like it. It's fine. That's the people are here to listen to you. So, I mean, the beautiful thing about that is I do believe that it's so true. First of all, there's so many things that happen that are challenging throughout your life, and you slowly get lost. It's like you're getting lost on this path, and you know the route that you're supposed to go. Sometimes people are establishing that route, and it's the wrong route from the beginning. Part of I mentioned I wrote this letter, this note, and part of the note is, I needed to establish that I was not living for the success of my parents feeling good that I was going to be successful. And my tragedy happened when I was younger. And my challenge was when I was younger. So as I wrote my book, believe it or not, it was the first time I ever went back and looked at the whole story. So I had never gone back and said, okay, this happens when you're 3 years old. You've been a protector, you've been an overachiever, you're hypersensitive and aware of your environment more than 99% of anyone around you.
Yes.
I'm living in survival mode at all times.
Yes.
And so, fight versus flight. So when things in my body start acting up, or when I'm sick about something, they're usually because I'm not attached to that. And the point I was getting at with the parents and the connection and the letter is, just like you, I talk a lot, but I can bring us back around. I promise everybody. The point is this: we have to go on this deep journey to not only see the things we love about where we've gone, but also some of the things that we don't love about it. And if the path we're walking is not the path that you set, that we've set for ourselves, it's always going to be just a little bit more challenging, and you're probably walking in the wrong direction. So what you're defining is how to get in touch with the parts of you that need these micro healing moments. But it also is about finding your vision, finding your direction, because without that, you're not connecting those dots, right?
And you actually, I consider it's better to be in the waiting room than going out and heading in the wrong direction, because that's even more exhausting. Imagine saying, I'm going to change my life, and because you're so used to certain perceptions, you don't know. You actually don't know what it is you want. People who think they do, maybe they do, but maybe they don't. And we need to just not take it for granted. Oh, I think I know what I want. I'm going to do this. And also, invisible loss is actually so subtle in one's life, and it changes the way you perceive yourself in these moments that have happened. So you start changing how you feel about yourself. You're doubting yourself more. You think, I don't think I can do this. I think this is not for me. I'm not ready for this. I'm going to just go here. And you forget who you are. You forget how awesome you are, how great you are. One of the biggest invisible losses that I've seen throughout all these years that people share, it's amazing actually, being shamed by a teacher in high school, in school, in college, in a meeting at work, being publicly shamed by being seen or told that you don't have the right answer. Oh, what did you do? That's not right. Even the slightest comment, you start seeing yourself all of a sudden the way that teacher, the boss, whoever that is that you respect in front of everyone else saw you. And it happens slowly. You don't wake up the next day and say, I'm not good enough. This stays with you. It's a very painful experience. And to have adults in my classroom over the years in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and to still be talking about that moment, it's because they never had the chance to talk about it. They never said, oh my God, I didn't realize that moment really affected my choices in not only jobs, but relationships. Our partners, how we choose our partners based on someone we're not, because we have no access to that person. I get really passionate about this.
Well, it's just getting deep. It's about not living your life numb. It's about truly awakening and opening up yourself. But in order to do that, you can't just be going through the motions. What you're talking about in one sense is you're saying it's really important for us to enjoy the process. This is what you wanted to do when you wrote this book, that you want to actually enjoy the walk and the journey. But you also have to make sure you're checking in on the result occasionally. Yes. And looking back. Otherwise, you're losing your path. And as you were talking about that, one other comment is I can remember in the fifth grade, I went to Catholic school. I had great nuns. I had great teachers. I had one that was slightly more aggressive and occasionally really, really not nice. And wow. And she stood behind me when I was walking in a procession in the church one time and said how I was waddling like a duck and how and she was just beating everybody up in the line. And my defense, truthfully, because I think I had been through things that were way worse in my brain and in experiences. So I always made it a joke, and I would own it, and I would laugh about it, and I'd share it with other people, and it made it nothing. And we were all together because most of us went kindergarten through 8th grade, and we were all together recently after 30 years.
Wow.
And there were still some people who saw themselves in those ways. One young man in particular said, I know it's probably hard to believe that I have a great wife and and I thought to myself, oh my gosh.
Yep.
I stopped him. I was like, hey, you were smarter than everybody else. You were an amazing person. Maybe you didn't fit into the mold of the average 7th and 8th grader, but it doesn't mean that that's who you are the rest of your life. But they're still thinking that.
Yes. And when that comment comes from someone you are positioned to respect as a child, as like you're, this nun, this person, this whoever it is behind you, watching you, observing you, the thing is that shift in perception of self is the invisible loss that we got to go find, track it down, and say, aha, that's who I was. Let me find a way back to that, and it's not going to be easy. It's gonna take steps, and it's gonna have you be rebellious. There's gonna be rebellious. I call it the divergent phase in the book. There's gonna be moments where you're gonna be going against what your family and your friends think of you, or because that's the way they saw you for a long time, and all of a sudden here's you. Here's you that you're born to be, behaving differently, and everyone is like, wait a minute, that is just, what is this? What's happening to you? Are you okay? You haven't been better than before, and you have to keep pushing. And one thing I say, and when people are reading the book, I say to them, you're gonna want to give up, you're gonna want to shut the book and not go further, and I'm gonna just ask you to keep going, because this is gonna get harder. And that's why the number one thing I say to people, when you start to exit that waiting room, I want you to do it in the least scary way. Actually, if you don't feel fear at all, I want you to choose steps that feel rewarding and great in the beginning. Because in the beginning, it is important to go out, metaphorically speaking, and stay out as long as we can, come back, rest, go back out again, do the things that you'll see. The book may come across as complex. I want to say this, but it works. And if there was a shortcut, I would have found it. I wouldn't have had to do all these years of work. I would have just done it myself and changed my life. But there's no shortcut to this. It's taking us a lifetime to be here, and it's going to take a little bit of time to exit this place. And Scott, and I know you're very passionate about this too, we want this for everyone else. I have to say, I experienced a Life Reentry journey, one just this last few months, very different, very inner journey of Life Reentry, and another one in 2021. And the one in 2021, I took a step and I did something that I have wanted to do since I was a child, like 5 or 6 years old, and circumstances where that I couldn't do it. And then when I had the choice to do it, just like you, I was in survival mode and chose not to. So it was up to me at some point, and I chose not to do it. And actually, it's very hard for us to make the choice that's right for us. It's one of the hardest choices to make. And I made the choice in 2021. And I experienced, and I feel emotional whenever I go back to the moment. I experienced this moment of bliss. I didn't expect. It was like, wow. I guess that's a real Life Reentry moment. Like, after all these years, I'm the teacher, I'm the I created this. And I was like, oh my God. And you can never go back to the same waiting room again after that. Like, you can never go back to living life the way it was before once you experience this moment. And for those who are wondering, I in 2021, I went, while I was writing this book and while I was doing the Klinger trials, teaching class, like, I was busy. I was crazy busy. I was working too hard. I decided to go back to school and do an MFA in painting, which is, I've always wanted to be an artist. I've always, like, since I can remember, this was the one thing I've wanted to do desperately. And I always did it as a side little fun thing, but never took it seriously. And when I signed up and I got accepted in school, and I put in my portfolio to get the yes, I had to include 20 paintings of all the paintings I've done. So all of these paintings that I'd done in moments in my life just for myself, they came dancing together, one by one, came in and knocked on the door of that university and said, here she is. Obviously she wants to be an artist, let her in. And I got in, and I will never forget that moment. I'm going to graduate in the spring of 2025. I did it for people who have dreams. It's possible to be very busy. It's possible to be making other dreams come true at the same time, writing books and helping the world and say yes to yourself at the same time, Scott.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great, first of all, congratulations. That's
Thank
really,
you.
really cool. And I think it's also such a great correlation because we know how art can heal.
Yeah.
So the other side is when your specialty is grief and loss and helping people through these both micro and macro level challenges, art can be a way that can certainly help. So maybe all those things. I feel like sometimes in our lives it's a scatter chart of all these things that have no connection whatsoever. And I've said this on the show before, but sometimes it's just the right time to bring it up again. And it's when you look back, and when I looked back when I wrote my book and I looked at the point I was at to where I had come from, everything was in alignment. It
Wow.
was it was all in alignment. It's not always so evident
No.
to you in the moment, but it is always in alignment. And I admire when people are willing to take chances. I think sometimes it's funny. I often spend a lot of time in survival mode, and you recognize it even when you know you're doing it. But if I travel, when I do this show, when I do things that I know are natural, that I just enjoy doing, I'm forcing myself away. I'm forcing myself to stop whatever I'm doing and have a great conversation in the middle of a Friday. Like
Yes.
it to me, it's people always ask, how do you do all these things? And the thing is that yes, there are always some things I could let go of. There are always some things that I probably need to soul search and figure out whether or not that's the direction I'm going in. But for the most part, I've always built the next chapter while I'm in the current one.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
to me is powerful. Like,
Yes.
why do you have to wait to define? Because you'll never do it that way. It's
Never.
too big of a move.
Yes, and actually, I always tell people, never leap and the net will appear experience. Never, I'm like, why? Why jump from the highest skyscraper out of your life like this? It's so tragic. Actually, it's a big tragedy when we try to change our life, unless it's like urgent that it has to be done today and you can't. And of course, there's exceptions to the rule, but I say to people, we got to do this slowly. We got to responsibly also live in a way that allows healing in every direction. That this has to feel good. This has to feel natural. And I can't lie and say it was hard work. I mean, I was working, I was teaching, writing, taking care of my family, and then I was doing art until 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, right? And especially in the first few classes in the beginning, because it was hard, but I couldn't be happier. I was listening to Frank Sinatra at 2 a.m. with my headphones on and drawing, and everyone was asleep, and I would stop and say, you brought yourself here. How great is that? And I was tired, but I felt young, Scott. I felt like, I want everyone to experience these moments, whatever they are, whatever it is that you want to be doing, and it might look very different, and it will look different for every person who's listening. But just imagine you doing something just for yourself in the middle of the night, just like you've always wanted to do, whatever that is. All I could think about was, I hope I live long enough, because finally got to say yes to myself, and now I'm really loving my life. Maybe for the first time, it doesn't feel so hard, and it doesn't have to be so hard. It doesn't have to be so hard, Scott.
Yeah, I think it's a great message, and I think a lot of people that listen to this show are high performers, but are they performing for the right things? So just because you earn a lot of money, or maybe you earn more than you ever dreamed of, but you're still not where you want to be. Like maybe you're spending zero time with your family and it's something that you've prioritized. I can't tell you how many men I come across in business that say, oh, the number one most important thing in my life is my family. And you're like, oh, well, I mean, you're literally always gone. How are you prioritizing these things? Or what, and I understand that we, especially men, can get in that role where they're protecting and they're providing, and that is how they feel they're doing it. And then they feel this loss or this emptiness, especially in moments like dropping their kid off to college. I've had so many of my friends that have been through this that are guys saying, you might be surprised. It's very emotional. And I'm like, I'm not surprised at all. I'm quite aware. Unfortunately, I'm too aware. But
Yes.
the I think the reason is that it's emotional for different reasons. You're going to look back at the decisions that you've made, and you're going to feel like you followed the right path, that you altered and course corrected where you needed to, and you're
Yeah.
continuing to do so as you can. A lot of these men and women that have that feeling of loss that's abrupt and quick, it happens because they weren't aware as it was getting closer and closer that time was going faster,
Yeah.
and they were not maybe dedicating in the way that they wanted to.
No, and I have two girls, and they both went to college. And I remember when they went, and it was, and Scott, you're about to experience this, my friend. It's, oh my God! Like, I was crying and crying afterwards, and I was crying, and I came home, and it was during COVID, and my plan was always, when I drop off my first kids to college, or like, I'm gonna just get in the car and drive until I stop crying. And I thought I was going to go on this amazing road trip, and I was going to just cleanse and just cry and cry and cry. And I was stuck. We couldn't go anywhere. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I just have to sit at home and cry myself like every night. And it's such a, oh, yes. And for men, and I remember like the men are experiencing so many, I want to say, and I've said this many times in my conversations, many more invisible losses, because they are raised in an environment that they have to be tough. They have to be the protectors. I mean, still, there's these traditional roles that we still live by, even though it's obviously changing for the new generations, but the generations of our generation, the men are still feel like they can't share their feelings, they can't do all those things, and they have so many invisible losses. They don't go to support groups, and they don't go, like in my classes, like 85% were women, and when the men that showed up, I mean, the progress and the amazing work they were doing, I was like, they were the cheerleaders, they were doing the work, we were all so proud of them. I'm like, imagine if more men said yes to this. I mean, we would go through a revolution, I think, completely. Like, they maybe say they want to stay at home, or they may want to do, I don't know what they would want to do. We don't know yet, Scott. We don't know.
Well, you get into a role in your family, and you have to, and men are, where mom will sacrifice service.
Yes.
In a way that's unique and different than dad. Dad will lay his life on the line without
Yes.
question,
Yes.
and including his mental health.
Yes.
So there is no time to a man that loves his family that isn't worth spending on them versus him. And so it's very challenging. And I understand it. I could see the progression. I also think men get to a very unique spot after 40. It takes men a long time in general. Now, this is a generalization, but men, and Napoleon Hill wrote about this in Think and Grow Rich. All the men that built America all did it after 40, because they are able to think at a different level. They start to acknowledge emotion and logic. They start to actually push their energy in the right direction. And so I would imagine it also helps them maybe feel some things they hadn't felt in a while, and working towards that can be really, really valuable. So I actually went through it last year, because we moved my youngest son to 3-4 hours away to play at a soccer academy.
Oh my
And
God.
so I think what's interesting is I did it already, and that was the biggest change we'd ever. It was a shock. It was immediate, and we've talked about it on the show before. But what's interesting is, it's still unique when you're dropping your oldest off. There's still something different.
Yes.
Like, the youngest was almost just painful because we weren't ready for it. But the oldest, it's a new chapter. That they need you a little less, and they should, as they go. And, you see all those Instagram reels and things that say, by the time your child's 18, 90% of their time has. Now, obviously, they don't grow up in a Greek and Italian family,
No.
because I see my mom every week, a couple times a week, every Sunday for dinner. We still have that time, but it is definitely emotional, and you feel it. But the key, what I'm trying to figure out for the parents listening, is the right balance between, I remember going to college and wanting to immediately come home. So I had done the whole, I hate everything at home. I don't want to come home to dinner. I don't want to talk to my parents. I don't like anything about them. And then I got to school and started calling my mom every night at like 11 o'clock from a payphone, like, I'm ready to come home. I need to come home. And she was so good to just say, no, she listened, she acknowledged, and then she was like, okay, well, go ahead and try tomorrow and let me know how it goes. Basically, like, I'm not listening to you fail or quit. I will listen to and validate how you feel, but I'm not going to give in to what we both know was right.
Great mom,
and,
by the way.
Yeah,
great. I mean,
I have great parents. I'm very blessed.
She did she did it in such a balanced way, and listen to you, but then at the same time, let's try again tomorrow, which you could go to bed and say, okay, maybe tomorrow. Like, it wasn't long, it was just the next day, right? Maybe tomorrow she'll say yes to this. Maybe tomorrow she'll realize how much I'm suffering, right?
Yeah,
and
I
then,
knew what was happening, though.
Yeah.
I knew I was being tricked. The whole time I knew I was being tricked. But at the end of the day, it still feels better than just someone saying, suck it up, or somebody saying, or not talking about it at all. And so there is a fine line between the parent having that steadfast mindset and letting the child know that it's time to move on, because it's really important. But at the same time, acknowledging that it is very, very challenging for them too.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if you know this part of the story, but when I was 18 years old, having grown up in Greece, my dad decided that it was time for me to leave the country completely. And in a world at the time when nobody else did, all of my friends, the world I've known all of my life, everyone stayed at home. Everyone was there. I was the only one in the whole class, the whole high school possibly, that I left the country to go and study overseas. And I remember I took the bus to Athens, and the whole class was there. They were climbing on the bus to say goodbye to me. I mean, there's a very old picture of that. And I remember feeling such catastrophic loss, thinking to myself, my dad was tough. My dad is like, you got to go, spread your wings. You got to be different than everyone else. And I was like, oh my God, why do I have to be different than anyone else, right? I just want to be the same. I just want to stay here. And they said to me, just like your mom did in a different way, they said, just go for 1 year. Just 1 year, and you come back exactly a year from today. Go a year, just learn to speak English better, learn the language, and come back in a year. Of course, I never went back, right? I went to the UK, so that was me going to England, and I spent actually 10 years in England and did my bachelor's and master's. Got into Durham University, which was, in England, it's Oxford, Cambridge, Durham. It's the third oldest school in, like, Harry Potter. There were scenes that Harry Potter were filmed there. Like, I lived in this castle-like world. I made things happen that I didn't think were possible for me, and I'm grateful. So I'm grateful for, just like your mom said, just do it for a little bit and then come back. So I did it longer, and when I first got there, I was just so homesick and so devastated. But I mean, when I look back at my life, it was tough in many ways, right? But at the same time, I'm grateful for the push out of the nest, just like you're doing with your kids, just like your mom did, just like I did with mine. I always told my kids, I want you to be independent, but I also want you to feel the love I have. And so we're very close with my two girls. When their dad died, we would hold hands. They were 4 and 6 years old at night. Every night, we do this very small circle, just the three of us, and we would say, together forever, together forever, together forever. So the girls and I are tight. We want to have a tattoo, the three of us, that is the same, and we're still planning it and drawing it up. And we went through so much. And they're tough kids, but at the same time, they live in Austin. I live in Austin now, and they live like 20 minutes away from me. And wherever they go, I'm just going to follow them, because I've lived away from my family. My family and my sister live in Greece To this day. I lived away from my family, and I moved to the U.S. In 1998. I lived away from my family forever. It was another, invisible loss. I never had family close by for everyday Sunday dinners or let's all hang out, let's all watch a movie together. I didn't have that. It had to be always like Christmas or summer or like all or nothing. It was never, we're either going to live together for a whole month, which has its own challenges, because they're coming to visit, or we're going to have nothing for a whole year at all. So I want to be close to my kids. They've both graduated from college now, and they're living their best lives, but they're around the corner. They're just over there, which makes me so happy,
Yeah.
But they can leave. I always tell them, you can leave, you can go. Again, if you want to, I won't stop you. I'll encourage it, but I'll just come visit a lot, So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've used my life model to prioritize the most important things in my life and build around those things for 20 plus years. And the reason I bring that up is what you're defining to me is the who's in your life that matter most. You also acknowledge that the getting uncomfortable actually puts you in a position that allowed you to be very, very successful. And your dad probably saw something in you that he didn't see in everybody else.
Yeah.
And we're not willing to listen to our parents at those moments. And so it's sometimes the only thing that we will listen to is, this is what you're doing. And you just do it because you don't really know that you don't have to do it. If you didn't want to do it, you didn't have to do it. But, especially with the firstborn, they're way more willing to do whatever you tell them. And, but I prioritize the most important things through love, impact, faith, and energy. And I'm imbalanced all the time. But what I do is as I find myself feeling lost or less connected, I go back to my tool and I brain dump in each category and I write down, who are the people I'm not spending time with? Who are the people I am? Is it providing good energy or bad? And what I know is there were years where we had young kids and I would go watch football for a very short amount of time with my buddies. And it was like we had just had kids and my wife was like, yeah, go watch football on a Sunday. So for like 2 to 3 hours, I'd go watch football. I'd have some drinks with my buddies, and then we always had Sunday dinner. And I remember going, oh, I don't even want to go. I just want to stay here, watch more games. And it was like this feeling of, then I would get there, and I'd be like, oh, I'm so glad. And then the next generation, then my sister's kids were there. My brother now has a baby. Like I look forward to watching baby Sophia crawl now live. Like that's a fun thing all week we look forward to. So being around your family and prioritizing that is a way that I think, as long as they want you around, everybody.
Yes.
But it's a way to really find that bliss in the moment when we're all gone, and someone does our eulogy. They're going to talk about how good of a friend you were, how much you loved,
Yes.
what you did with them, not about what you did in your profession, not very rarely, unless it's impacting people like your profession. But
and Scott, yours, and I think about, you're in the same, like you have a relationship with your audience. I have a relationship with all these people. Some of the community members have been with me since I started in 2010, and they tell me stories about all these years ago, and they almost become like an integral part of our lives. And when I think about the end of my life, I do hope that people will come forward and say, she helped me with this and she helped me with that. And I know, right, Scott, they will for you, because what we have done in our life with our profession, it's like a destined path in many ways. Like yes, we're there for our family, and yes, I mean, I could not imagine, this is why I got into the grief work, to understand how it is. How do we ever recover from losing a family member, losing someone we love? I still struggle to understand that, but I think the people we're helping every day. So when I wake up in the morning and I write something online, or I come and do one of these conversations, and I feel like we're saving someone. Like I believe that. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, why sit and do this, right? I'd rather meet you, if you're my neighbor, I meet you outside, we go for a hike, we go for a walk, and we can talk, we can have this same conversation by ourselves. It doesn't have to be listened by everyone else, but we both believe, and I deeply believe this. I believe this with all my heart, that every time we write something, say something, someone happens to listen, that they just needed to hear it from that point of view. We may be saying the same thing as other people, but slightly different. That's going to connect with someone in a different way than someone else would have said it. And that is the magic. And then it's all worth it. Then it's all worth it. Otherwise, if it wasn't, I should have been an artist a long time ago, and maybe I should have regardless, and you should have done something completely different. We believe in this conversation, Scott.
Yeah, I completely agree. Almost every week minimally, I get a random text from someone I never expected. Yeah. and or a message on LinkedIn or Instagram, and it says, "Hey, I just listened to this conversation and I just wanted to thank you. I needed that." Or a neighbor walks by and tells me that they didn't know about this until they listened to our podcast. Yes. And it's quite frankly, I had a family member say, why are you doing all this? Like, why are you doing the YouTube and the are you trying to be famous? And I said no, and it came from a good place. It wasn't even a negative like connotation. It was honestly like, are you trying to be famous? I said, I don't care in any way about fame. And I said, but what I do believe is, number one, having these conversations and sharing them with people helps people, period. Yes. And it helps me. It helps me. At the end of the day, I'm having a great conversation. I'm having a connection with people. I'm building an army of wise people that have been on this show that I can talk to, I can connect with, yes. I can build something with. Like, I think it's a great thing, but most importantly, it's those texts. It's so funny. And men, I get texted from guys, and it's so funny because they do it in a way that they've been thinking about it forever, but another guy sending another guy a text thanking them about something is really weird for the guy doing it. But I'm going to tell you, if you're listening and you've ever done that, you should do it more often, because most of the time what you've said, which I think is very valuable, just because we know it, just because we talk about it, just because we teach it, doesn't mean that we do it all the time. And so even when you reward a conversation you really enjoyed and you send that message to somebody, or you tell you about your work and how great it's been or how impactful it's been, what you do for us as listeners is so valuable, because it does give us a little bit of a the mouse gets this cheese, and it feels like we could keep moving forward and doing things that are going to help people more, because that's why we do it. That's the reason. And
and I think the goal for these conversations that we're having at driving the car, or like on a hike, even though we're sitting at our desk, but you kind of get the picture. They're meant for, I don't know, they are like, I feel like they're destined. I believe that the universe has orchestrated these moments, and fame, by the way, being known for something, there's a form of invisible loss in this. Actually, it's the glimpses that you and I have had, Scott, like those little tiny, like pixel of, I'm not even comfortable with the word fame. To be known, for me, it has been a very hard thing. Like it's not an easy. It's a lot of responsibility. There's pressure because if you care about the people you're interacting with, then there's gonna be responsibility to do it really well and to be the best you can be for them as well. And I think that has been. I mean, I know what I'm gonna say next. You're gonna doubt. Everyone who's listening to this conversation is gonna say that may not be true, Christina. I'm gonna say this, and I promise you it's true. It's true. I'm an introvert. See See, I know it. People are
No,
like,
but when you're in your space, but when you're in the space that you're comfortable,
yes,
introverts are the deepest. When you're in
yes,
the space where they're
thank you.
comfortable, they give you the most information.
Yes,
They love the space.
and it has to be like this, otherwise I can't do it. It's just like we started this, like I struggled doing this because I am an introvert and I recharge alone and I love alone time. I'm like, I want to be alone. I love being alone, drawing, painting, reading, working just behind my computer. That's how I became a writer. I didn't want anyone to see me. I hid. So I'm an introvert. So when I step forward into a visible spot of whatever kind it is, it has to feel that it's doing something, and it has to feel right for me now as well, because of the responsibility of it. If someone is going to spend an hour of their time listening to any of these conversations, Scott, we better make it worth their time, because time is the most precious thing. It is the most precious. That's why people say you need to say no to the things that are not for you. You have to say no. If I say yes to this conversation, it's because it's for me and it's for Scott, and yes, for others, but it's also for us, Scott. It's I will remember you. I will think about our conversation. I imagine your life as we're getting to know each other for the first time. We've never spoken before. I'm like, he's probably an amazing father, an amazing husband. I'm thinking about you saying goodbye to your son, like, writing these notes, the note that you wrote 3 or 4 days ago, like, having gone through, what is it that you went through when you were young? I'm thinking about it. And then you were taken to a school with nuns. And I'm like, poor guy,
I did love that part. For everybody, I love that part. It was only 1 or 2 moments I didn't love. But I also sprayed mace in my 8th grade classroom. I'm using air quotes, accidentally.
Wow.
And I got carried by the ear all the way down to the principal's office. And I deserved it. But I also learned a valuable lesson, and that was it's always good to get in trouble on a Friday afternoon because the principal's not there. And so Monday she had time to think and relax. And but you are right. I think I'm the same way. And I'm not introverted. I'm fully extroverted. But I watch my wife often come alive in moments where I've pressed her to go out or to have dinner with friends.
So she's like me. She's more like yes, we show up and in these kind of connections and experiences, but actually, in our heads, it's better if we stay.
Yes, she's all in when she's there, but getting her there is the challenge. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. I don't want to. So the key though is that we find what makes us comfortable. Jim Quick, I've used this analogy before. I love it. Jim Quick talks about, he wrote a book called Limitless, and he talks about introverts have only a select number of chips. And when those, say, 5 chips are done for the day, they're out. They have no more energy. Whereas an extrovert starts with 0 chips and they build on those chips until they crash. So they could get to 18 or 20 or some days only 5, but then they crash. And so having that balance is really good. But to your point, having conversations with depth and meaning are really why it's worth listening.
Yes,
and that's the goal.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, anyone who's listening, Jim Quick is awesome, and he has Limitless, an amazing book. He's a good friend. I just did his podcast, and he has experienced himself a lot of invisible loss, and he's taken all of his life lessons and he's worked really hard to create a body of work that gives so much knowledge. And this guy,
he's amazing.
He works hard. I've known him for a decade. Like, he works really hard and he's the real deal. So I'm glad I smiled when you mentioned him. He's the real deal. He's the good guy who is out there helping just like we are, doing it. And we all have our own. It's actually a lot of creativity if you think about it, Scott. You're doing it with your Freedom Street book. You're doing it with your podcast. You're doing it with your blog, with your YouTube, with all the things that you have brought together with your clients. You have coaching clients, I think, right? You're doing it. I did it with my books, but Jim is doing it with the brain. Everyone, whoever is listening, if you're wondering, What is my signature in the world? What is my blueprint? What am I here to create? The more unique and different, the more weird, the more strange, the closer you're getting to what it is that you should be doing. I can't say this enough. Like, if someone said to Jim when he was like 5 or 6 years old, one day you're gonna go out and help people's brains, and one of his invisible laws, and this is something he shares to everyone, like the teacher told the classroom that he had a broken brain, and that, look what he did with that moment of impact, that invisible loss for him, right? And if someone said to him then, like, this is what you will do, you can't believe it. So whatever you cannot believe or it's impossible, I want you to consider it. I want you to consider the most impossible, unique things that can be born from you. We're here for a reason. We're still alive because we haven't been done. We're not done yet. Thank God. I was thinking, if I stop writing, if I stop teaching about grief, am I going to die? And Scott, this is for real. I used to say to myself, what if this is what I'm here for? And if I do the art, if I choose to do art, I will die because I know it sounds crazy. Like I said, I have unique thoughts, which I'm very proud of. What if that's over? And I love my life now, and I want to live as long as possible. And I'm asking for that because I'm finally getting it right, Scott. I'm finally getting it right, and I want everyone else to get it right too. So it's about the way we live our life, more about that than what we write, what we say. It's about what we do and how we do it that others are learning from, I think.
Yeah, and it's about knowing that you are right where you're supposed to be right now. So
yes.
It's never too late.
Never.
You are right where you're supposed to be, and it can begin today or tomorrow, but there's always going to be time. And you know, I'll round out one story as we wrap up, but I went to a great event this past weekend. My grandmother's best friend from childhood turned 100, and my grandparents on that side are both gone, and so she is she's an aunt, but wasn't really an aunt at all. She's one that just was always in the family, and she comes to all of our family events. And we were in the church, and they brought her up to the front. And they said, you know, the family's Italian, so they decided to invite everyone in the church to the after party. And she was like, and then the whole church burst out in happy birthday, and she's dancing like this on the stage. I mean, it was very, very moving. But when you think about the lives that she's touched, yes. I am the grandson of one of her best friends from grade school, and I'm there. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And I get chills thinking yes. about the impact someone that just brought joy every time we saw her. Every time. And that is, it's the simplest thing. So as you change the world with the things you're doing, and Jim changes the brain, and we have conversations that hopefully help people find who they want to be when they grow up and how to get there. In their life, it can be as simple as just providing joy in someone's day, because it yes. was enough for me to be there, and that connection to my grandmother made me feel so excited to be there, and then to see all the generations in the room. So just so powerful. Life is so special, surrounded by the people that we love the most, and then acknowledging where we've been, but then obviously, you know, really choosing the path that's right for you is what you're directing. I love your message. I know it's not the last time we're going to speak. How do people find you? I need to make sure that people can find you and they can get your book. I have it here, Invisible Loss, Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief. Let me put it in the screen here.
Thank you.
And but how can they find you? Let's tell all the listeners.
I want to say to people, if there's one thing they're going to do, is to grab this book and grab Invisible Loss, go on Amazon, go wherever you get your books. And when you have this book in your hand, and take your time with it and do the homework. That's all. Just pretend it's school. I'm sorry, but do the homework and take your time doing it. I have a website, ChristinaRasmussen.com. It's all about my work, my books, but there's a small section at the bottom where I added a paragraph about my art, just a tiny bit. Nothing is for sale. I'm not selling anything. Actually, nothing is for sale. Nothing. That's a choice that I'm not. People are asking for classes. I'm not teaching right now. I do not see private clients. There is no art for sale. I wanted to arrive at this place and just have my original self conversation. You'll read about the original self and create moments of connection. And for it to be just about that and nothing else, God. That's it. So find the book, ChristinaRasmussen.com, and make a promise to us and to yourself that every day you wake up and ask yourself, is this exactly what you want? And if it is, go forward. If it's not, I'm not saying don't go forward, just pause and consider what else is possible for you. I'm excited for everyone's journey. I can speak for you, Scott, for this. We want the best life for everyone who's listening. The best life, even if it's just lasts for today, even if today this conversation is going to change the way you talk to someone else, the way your relationship is with a friend, with your partner, with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife. If you're going to have an authentic conversation with your mom, with your dad, whatever it is, those moments, I call them plug-ins, plugging into the new chapter. Just plug in, wake up and plug in. And thank you for having me, Scott. It was awesome.
An honor.
It was awesome.
It's an honor. Such a good time. The beginning of a new friendship. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.